Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this first of three. It's supposed to be the spring series. It doesn't quite feel like spring of inaugural lectures. It's my pleasant duty to welcome you all this evening and to welcome members from within the university community and from outside as well as I look around the congregation this evening. It's always good to have Bishop Vincent Malone, who always supports the universities on these occasions, and of course the Pro-Chancellor I saw rushing in just before we began. Monsignor Devine, I did see you, didn't I? Here we go. Good evening. May I also acknowledge very specially Professor Peter Siska's family. The Siskas moved to Liverpool from New York State. It seems so recent, but it reminds me it's well into the second year. And so we have with us Catherine, Eva, Carl, who I just met, and Lucas, who I look forward to talking with later. So welcome the Siska family and all those who are here to support Professor Peter Siska this evening. Professor Peter Siska is the foundation professor of geography and environmental science at the university. We have professors appointed each year, but we very seldom have foundation professors, meaning the first professor in the field. And Professor Peter Siska, as you'll hear from Professor Newport just now, is a professor of environmental science. I remember, and my wife is in the audience, both of us attended the same lecture in Durban several years ago by the famous Professor Philip Tobias, the anthropologist at Witwatersrand University, a very, very well-known anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. And Philip Tobias was saying that every time a serious scholar stands apart from their research and stands just a little bit away from what they're busy studying, they enter the realm of philosophy. Standing just a little bit apart from your discipline and reflecting on it, you enter the realm of philosophy. How true Professor Tobias was when he said that. And tonight I think you're going to see a geographer who is standing back a little bit from his discipline. Because when he does so, you'll see him enter into the world of cosmology, which is an intriguing topic before us. But to introduce the topic and our professor tonight, I'm going to invite the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Kenneth Newport.
I also take the opportunity to welcome distinguished guests and colleagues, and in particular, the friends and family of Peter Siska, to this, the first of our series of professorial lectures for 2015. It's the tradition of the university formally to mark professorial inaugurations in this way. And as one looks back at the range of professors that I have had the opportunity to introduce, the range is indeed quite staggering. We've had professors join us from across the world, as well as those much closer to home, including, I'm delighted to say, several who have been appointed to the professoria from among our own staff. Well, like all of our professors, Peter Siska has a distinguished academic career. He took his first degree at the Copernicus University in Bratislava in the Slovak Republic, where he gained a double major cum laude in geography and biology. It was also from Copernicus University that he earned his first doctoral level degree with a focus on geography and environmental science. Some years later, in 1984, he achieved a Candidatus Sciences, a level of academic distinction equivalent to a second PhD. There's a more personal side to this story, however, that I would like to weave into this academic resume. Unlike those of us who have had the privilege to have access to some of the very best educational systems in the world and to do so free of political or religious pressure, Professor Siska's life and career has not always followed an untroubled path. In addition to academic distinction, Professor Siska is known for his strong Catholic faith. And it was this which at times has put him at odds with the political establishment. He grew up under a strict communist regime, one early consequence of which was the imprisonment of his father, who lost his job in the local government as a result of his opposition to the Communist Party. Professor Siska's own refusal to deny his Christian faith meant that he was not able to continue teaching and researching at Kamensky University, and it was to take him several years to regain his status within academia and to find a level of personal stability in his life that most of us simply take for granted. It was in Germany that Professor Siska was able to regain a foothold and to find an outlet for his love of teaching and research. It was in Germany too that he met Kathy, an American student whom he later married. He moved to Texas, and to Texas A&M University followed, where Professor Siska was able to resume his academic career, and in the process earned one further doctoral qualification, now his third, a PhD in forestry. During the course of these studies, Professor Siska had the honor of being presented with an International Scholars Medal from the Nobel Prize laureate Norman Borlaug. In 1997, Professor Siska was appointed assistant professor and coordinator of the East Texas Natural Resource Project at Stephen F. Austin University in Texas. Later in 2004, he moved to Clarksville, Tennessee, to become director of the School of Agriculture and Geosciences at the Austin Peay University. And immediately prior to joining Liverpool Hope, which he did in 2013, Professor Siska was professorial chair of regional studies at the United States Military Academy at West Point in New York. As I've said, Professor Siska has a distinguished academic record. He has published 26 peer-reviewed papers on topics relating to his research interests in applied geography, GIS, and environmental issues. And in addition to that very focused academic work, Professor Siska has also translated Jan Cardinal Korek's book, The Night of the Barbarians, which relates to government persecution of religion and religious institutions during post-World War II socialist Czechoslovakia. Well, today, Professor Siska is a highly respected scholar. He has been successful in obtaining research grants to further his work. He is on the editorial boards of journals relating to geography and environmental science, and he's in very great demand as an international speaker, as his extensive travels and presentations in North America and Europe demonstrate. He has spoken at academic conferences from New Mexico to New Jersey and from the Czech Republic to London. And now, here in Liverpool, we have great pleasure indeed in inviting Professor Siska to present to us his inaugural lecture on the topic De Paradoxo Geocentrico Cosmologico. Professor Siska.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Professor PLA for his support and kind introduction. Thank you, Monsignor John Divine, for being here. Thank you for opening your church to the Slovak community and being so supportive of Slovaks in Warrington. Thank you, Reverend Professor Kenneth Newport, for kind introduction and for your words of encouragement. And thank you also my supervisor, Professor Nagar, for bringing the summary in the end of my lecture to your attention. I would like to speak without using the technology, because I would like to create the atmosphere of the time of Copernicus in 1600. Because he's in the center of this lecture. And he gave me a lot of comfort when I started my studies back at home as somebody in whom the science, brilliant science, and also the philosophy, theology, and religion is united. Before I go into the lecture, I just would like to briefly mention the title. It's about geocentric paradox. We all know that in the center of the solar system is the sun. The planet orbits around the sun. But to me, it's also a great paradox, because if we are the only conscious beings, the only conscious creatures, we are actually still in the center of the solar system. And most likely, we might be in the center of all the universe at this time. This is something special that we should sometimes reflect upon. Paradox is a contradictory statement that points at truth in a different way. And this life is really a contradiction. And we should be able to inquire what is behind this contradiction. But look at myself, look at this moment, look at this point of our life, this history. How is it possible that a person who was trained so well in atheism, in Marxist philosophy, in hating religion, and in hating capitalism at the same time, stands on the ground of a university that has Christian religious background and motifs, and speaking also, having an audience, respected reverends, and monsignors, and priests, and bishops. So it's a great paradox, isn't it? Might be something behind it, a message that we should perhaps read everyone on our own. What could this mean for all of us in our lives? Also, when I put my name for the very first time in the history, I used the middle name that reflects my father. I like to also give honor and respect my father. I would like to mention later. The name is actually, in English, would be translated as town crier. So that was his job. If you imagine the Middle Age times, and remembering from the movies how these town criers are coming. In England, I understand they're coming with the bell. But in Central Europe, they're coming with drums, beating the drums, and they pull out the official paper, and they said, everybody here, everybody listen, this is the government speaking to you, and this is what you need to do. And that was actually a profession of my father for a long period of time, until the technology came, and he didn't need drum anymore. He has a special, of course, place in the history of my village where I come from. Since the last name was so common, we had to be identified by our father's profession, actually, by our nickname. So if you would ask, or somebody would ask me, who are you? And you say, I'm Peter Siska. So to say, and for who is your father? What is your nickname? So now I have to say, the town crier, the family, and then people ask, finally, okay, I understand. This is where you are. I would like to also emphasize that during this period of time, I went through a lot of changes, extreme amount of changes. I moved with my family 24 times. And this life started from a certain point of my life. And this point was connected to my profession, was also connected to science. In the same way my father's life changed. It was also connected to his profession, to his work. In 1543, a great work was published. It was entitled De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium. And it was Copernicus' work. He was a Catholic monk, he was priest, he was a brilliant scientist, and he was Polish national at the same time. This work had a tremendous impact on society. First of all, it changed 1500 the logical system from geocentric into heliocentric. And that plays a significant role also in our profession. If the planet orbits around the sun, it has a tilt of 23.5 degrees, it causes the change of seasons, it's responsible for changes of temperatures, for dynamism in atmosphere, for distribution of heat from poles through equator to poles again, and it causes, is one of those fine-tuned elements that supports and allows life on this planet. Another aspect of Copernicus' work was that he introduced unwillingly a gap between the science and humanities, philosophy, theology, and religion. In spite of the fact that he was supported by Cardinal Schoenberg, his work was dedicated to Paul III and was well received at that time. This introduction of Galileo coming on the scene and his discoveries and his rebellious spirit, it became very controversial topic until today. Even today, very well-known scientists, Richard Dawkins, for example, Steve Hawkins from this country, Lawrence Krauss, and many others, perceive Galileo as a hero in terms of market for science, because he was rebellious against authority, against church, and he was put into home jail, where he continued his work. I would like to make now a personal story from this. This is where my personal story comes to. Because just like Galileo was asked a yes and no question in front of Inquisition, I was asked yes and no question in front of my Inquisition. This time it was different. It was Marxist. It was based on Marxist philosophy, materialism, and communism. So I had to appear in front of this committee. And just like Galileo was asked the question, does the planet orbit around the sun, or is the other one? He was supposed to answer no. So the same way I was asking a simple question, do you believe in God? I was just at the beginning of my career, very young, just got my job as assistant professor, and I was hoping for my career back at the university, at home. Never was planning to leave my country. I'd like to know that I was, perhaps if I could list the people who are the last candidates to emigrate, that my name would be in the end. So village strong, village background, such as Slovak in my ethnic background. Both my parents came from the village that was 700 years old, and our great-great-grandparents came from the local village. Never had a feeling about England. But suddenly I was facing this question, which I didn't expect. I expected many different questions, but not this one. And I was expected to say no. Tension built up. I didn't know what to say. I knew if I said no, I'm simply going to lie and I'm going to deny God. And I was immediately reflecting on the scripture, whoever denies me in front of people, I deny you in front of my Heavenly Father. So I was reluctant to say no. But at the same time, I didn't want to say yes. Because if I would say yes, it's the end of my career. And I was just thinking, seconds were building up, tension was building up. And I again remember a scripture saying, don't worry what you say in front of judges. The Holy Spirit will tell you. And I was not hearing anything. I was like, oh my God, I don't hear anything. There's no way God can exist. I just don't hear that. What am I going to say? And I didn't know how, but suddenly it came from my mouth, because I couldn't wait any longer. I said, yes. I don't think that I'm such a great believer. I have my doubts about the existence of God. But I think it should be more freedom in our country regarding this issue. Where people want to believe in God. That's it. Silence. Suddenly one of the committee looks at me and says, you know what, Patterson? You were born under the red side in this country. You grew up in a socialist, Marxist ideas. How can you have such a feeling? What's the matter with you? And I didn't know what was the matter with me. I just wasn't able to say anything more. And after a while, I said, you can go. So I left the room. And I was hoping that this would be forgotten. If you could just imagine, all what I wanted was peace. I just didn't want anybody to tell me anything. I just wanted this to be completely forgotten. Wiped out from everybody's memory. So I could continue my life as before. My normal life as before. As a single man, trying to build up his career. I had friends, enjoying my village, and parties with my village people that I grew up with. But it was not so anymore. Next day I came to work. They found my head was already we were all talking. His finger was asking me to come. So I just hurried up to meet him. He looked at me and said, what did you say yesterday to the committee? Inquisition. Go back, apologize. I'm advising you, go as soon as you can. Quick back, apologize, and tell them something. Tell them that you were drunk, you didn't know what you were talking about. Now see also the cultural difference between East and West. I don't think Professor Peter would accept my apology if I came to him and said, I'm sorry, but I said I was drunk. I don't think this is to go in the United States either, because that's even stronger puritanist country. No one would dare even mention alcohol in the places I was so far. But over there, I would have been like, okay, going back to the committee saying, I'm sorry what I said yesterday. I just had a little schnapps and I just somehow my mind was not clear and I just didn't know what I was talking. It would have been accepted. Unfortunately, it was not that so. And it ended up as a geographer, as an environmental scientist, so I had no idea what to do. That would be a great analysis, psychoanalysis, what was happening after that. We don't have time. But anyway, I ended up in 1984 immigrating to the United States, doing all kinds of hard jobs, re-emigrating, coming back home. I suffered a great homesickness. Something 20, 30 years ago, people actually didn't mention, they were not proud. But now, especially when I studied with those Professor Siska, we really took care about homesickness of our students because it was perceived as a very important aspect of the military career. But at that time, people didn't talk about it. But I can mention, I was terribly homesick for years, for European culture, for my home, so lucky. And I kept coming back and forth, more 24 times. And I still was not able to find home, the place I couldn't find. So it shows that it wasn't just about science, it wasn't just about doing job, it was much more deeper. And it also affected my family until today. So these kind of things so I did all kinds of jobs, from cleaning toilets to being a researcher, to be a machinist in a machine shop, learn how to do that. Never forget that. Imagine somebody with PhD standing in front of their machine. He was supposed to drill press into the steel parts. And I was shown how to do that. In America, used to get a to do the catch. Go. So I was trying to go, and it just didn't work. First day, second day, and I was just messing up with parts. Suddenly, he clicked something in my hand, got a feel for the machine, and the threads were coming out. And one day I made 400 to the machine, 11.5 machine. Next day I made my co-worker who was introducing me to the machine, and he thought I would never make it as a machinist. He quit his job. But this was part of adaptation, different times, different environments, different cultures. And sometimes it's hard for me to, not to adapt, it's hard for me to accept somebody else's culture because I've seen so many. And I would like to say to people, don't you see that this is bad? Don't you just see that it's from Germans or some Americans or from English or from Slovaks and do this. Every culture has something special. It's not just one truth, there's so many truths. Geographical, boundaries, connected to regional identity in culture. It's amazing how deep inside what type of kind of creatures we are. It's amazing to study human beings, human soul, human spirit. So, going back to my geosciences, finally, particularly Professor Zen, I began serious again my career in academic field as a researcher. And I went through a lot of jobs. Enjoyed my approach, which showed me the opportunity to be back in something that I liked so much, and that was a relationship planet, relationship to planet Earth. That's what Copernicus moved around the sun. And learning all this complexity of life. Learning all this relationship. And enjoying at the same time the beauty of nature. I could never be advanced and never be happy going to the field, collecting the samples, looking at the sky above me. And at that moment I always think I have the best job. Sometimes it may be dangerous. It's not always what you think about. My last research in Virginia and North Carolina was a dismal lake, natural reserve. There's no human actually input into this area. It's completely flat. And as I was collecting my samples, often I was beating the bushes. Just a native person probably be careful. Another big other snakes here, and they're quite dangerous. One bite, and you feel it. But sometimes I just stuck my hand because I was so tired, I was so running, and take the sample from the surface without even looking in the bushes and risking that snake might be dead. On the other time, I had my daughter actually driving the car behind me on the road, on the field of paper, because there was a bear, red bear in the distance, and just in case the bear gets the kind of ideas that you can jump quickly into the car and back off. So those type of things, it's not always just enjoying the nature. One time, one hand, you enjoy it, on the other hand, you enjoy the environment. It's not quite safe. see. And you have a big sign in front of the natural preservation telling you how you can also be done there. What is the difference? What is the advice? First of all, face the creature, face it. Don't run away, just face it. Because if your child put it behind you, and there is still not happening, still doesn't pick up, just stop. Thank you very much. This happens against the cause, against the power of many more programs that we have. I don't think it should be enough. So I collected the samples from my last research. There's only 2 labs that could analyze, and they both were very busy. So the samples are still on the line to be analyzed. 8 feet, around, it's still 2 years after analyzed. So just to point out that some research took a very long time to actually come to the publication. It's not easy. This kind of dirt research, dirt science. You go to field and you interact with the field. You call it science, and you try to get your analysis in science. But at I made a little trip to this geoscience. I really don't want to bore you with my research, because I could talk about research a long time. Everyone's interested in what I've been doing. Just briefly, I'd like to mention that working from marine sciences laboratory takes us working on digital evolution, working on pollen distribution patterns. In 2001, we published an article about the whole application of GIS and geostatistics into the polygon. It was the first in the history. And I called it New Field Geopolygon in 2001. The name didn't go through. In 2010, the researchers published a similar article, and they called this field of science geolocation. Turn to north. So, 9 years later, imagine the situation, speaking about reference, for everything is not really objective. Sometimes it's not very nice what happens to us during the career. So my term, geopalynology, was dropped. Geolocation took over, and it's now accepted in general as a spatial analysis of power. Why power? It has very different meanings. The best one I can mention is forensic studies. We all carry pollen on our clothes, and if we analyze the pollen from your clothes, from your laptop, for example, we can find out in whatever environment you're starting to move, you will be. And that's important knowledge to pin down criminal activities or find out where a person was killed. There was a case in my colleague and Professor Brian analyzed when the person was dropped in New York into cornfield. And everybody assumed the person was killed in the state of New York. But when the pollen analysis showed the case, they went all the way from California to New York. So the policemen, investigators, change significantly their region of interest from New York State to California, actually exactly on the opposite side of the United States. And when we often talk about the United States, we just put the United States equivalent to any country in the Slovakia. But the United States is 10 million square kilometers. UK is much, much less, 200,000. France is about 500,000. Texas is bigger than any state in Europe. So this kind of sciences we talk about, and this kind of research can be applied to different cases, different studies, and different applications. From another study, I can mention sinkholes in karst areas. Tennessee campus was built around the pretty picturesque area, but at the same time, symbols tend to collapse sometimes. And then people with houses, if nothing happens, at least they find themselves in a very weird position in their house. And the whole house structure is falling, and they are on the bottom of the sinkhole. So that's another application applying the spatial analysis in predicting the symbol for us. Now the last one that I would like to brag very quickly was from the northwest of the United States, so-called basin. We were looking at analyzing biodiversity. What are the causes of this biodiversity? We had over 100 parameters. We used the factorial analysis. And what is interesting is one of the most significant factors that has impact on that biodiversity, the polar distribution, is actually the density of light. December, January, February. So something that is closely connected back to Copernicus, to the planet orbiting the sun, to the time when winter solstice, the axis of rotation is beginning to change. So the orbit of our planet is coming to this very significant point in the cosmology of our solar system. And the nature is so intimately connected. It's just amazing. Because basically, you see, the temperature doesn't change much in December from that one. It was the beginning of December or November, January. Yet the nature already knows it's turning around in different direction. And that brings me back to a very important aspect of my studies, of meaning of everything that I do. And I reflect also on the very first conflict that I faced in the flight of the committee. And that is, how does nature know things? How does nature know at a certain point of time, 12 to 50 million years ago, there's insects there. So whales don't have to use wind for polar distribution. Insects do. The insects didn't exist before this period of time. Suddenly insects exist. And nature is able to utilize it. Self-knowledge of nature is amazing. And it becomes also source of this Copernicus that is conflict. Or Galileo is conflict. Is everything just generated, produced, created by nature? Or there is supernatural mind, intelligent mind behind it? All my studies, every page I study, every time I do research, I always reflect on that. Maybe not because I would be so interested, but because of my first experience. When I came in front of the committee and had this controversy with my colleague. And I think I will learn it is such an important question to be answered. And it has deep impact on our society. I would like to use an example to point out why it is such a deep impact. In 1997, I was present at the lecture of Martin Heisenberg. Martin Heisenberg is son of Werner Heisenberg. Werner Heisenberg is a Nobel Prize winner for physics and also contemporary of Albert Einstein. So Martin presented his research. His research was about drosophilus, fruit flies, because as we know, the genes, anybody who took class, course in genetics, fruit flies are very good for studying the genes and learning genetics. So Martin and his group decided to modify the genes in fruit flies' brain and study degradation. What They put them into a tube, into a system of glass tubes, and they began heating those glass tubes. They put fruit flies inside, If the fruit fly was not able to find the exit, it worked, and it was dead. So they had to think, they forced the fruit fly to think. Guess what? Only fruit flies with modified genes were able to find exit. Normal fruit flies were not able to find it. They always died inside that tube glass system. Doesn't this remind us something that is happening today? We hear about global warming. We hear about all these changes happening on the natural environment. It's going to deeply affect us. Yet it seems like we can't find the exit of this situation. We show that science is not everything. Scientifically, we know. Logically, we understand. So what's wrong with us? We can't do anything about it. Or we do so little that no significant changes happen. I see the cars, size in the United States do the same. Becoming smaller, we growing up. Quite large size. Maybe they now using a little bit less gas than used 20, 30 years ago. We go up a lot of gas. But it's still the same things going on. A lot of carbons being greenhouse gases being injected into our atmosphere. And global warming is increasing. I've experienced from New York, my western cadets, to Alps. And I would like to do it also with other students, of course. And we are looking for the melting ice. The ice really melts rapidly. You have landmarks every year, every 5 years, how much of ice melted. Yet it keeps melting, and we keep breathing the same ice. We are not able to do anything significant about it. Going back to Copernicus. Copernicus was a man who science and humanities and religion were united. We created a gap between sciences, physical science, that measure things, that provide the evidence, and between humanities, theology, and religion. And we have them involved can be really unfortunate. I don't think so. We have to unite science and religion. And going through venues, deep venues, moral venues, including perhaps we can finally start making significant difference. Many people say that, I hear many people say, our religion is not very useful because it causes conflicts. Look at the Middle East, look at Ireland, look at different regions. What does the religion do? It just causes conflict. We should all abandon it. It's a myth. That's what the modern science is telling us. But it's actually the opposite. When I define religion for my friends, I always told them, religion is a collection of sacred values. And people feel very strongly about sacred values. And you will never be able to change it. So stop complaining about religion causing conflicts. Just like we feel strongly about our family. These people here are not my family. I say, they're from the same Slovak, Czech background. And to a large extent, we understand each other so much good, so much well, that it brings us very quickly together. So, the religion is its explosiveness, has a lot of energy. If we can channel this energy properly in science, together with our rational, I believe we can progress significantly forward. Ignoring criticizing, putting these two against each other is not going to work. And that's what happened to this Middle Age, that's what happened to Galileo. And from Galileo, it went to the revolution, French revolutions, it went to the socialist, communist revolution that won in 1917 in Petersburg and in Moscow, and then flew into Central Europe and so Czechoslovakia as well. And we experienced the full impact of it at that time. So I believe that theology, religion, philosophy should be united with hardcore sciences, physical sciences, and it's time to do that. We should challenge the same values that we feel strongly about. We should nurture, help people to grow, and at the same time, bring it together with the science. And the place like university is the best place. It's really the best place. Education is the foundation of everything. And education is everything is possible. Indoctrination is nothing wrong with that. I've been indoctrinated by atheists. Yet I'm not an atheist. But some principles of socialism, Marxism, still stay inside. So, it is something to really consider good education for the age. Education about learning the planet, learning about it, and sustainable development, because that's what we need. We need sustainable development. We need a future generation of young people who understand what sustainable development is, who love this planet, who love their profession, and can bring the results of it into save final moment when saving the planet from disaster. Why I think that way, people already before me thought about some writer, I don't remember the name, wrote a story about people traveling on a train. The train was going through town, so people are enjoying every maybe discussion, thinking, and nobody noticed that the train speed is increasing and the brakes are working. So what is the end result? Nobody knows. Maybe out of the tunnel there will be a flat surface and everything will slowly calm down, or maybe there will be a drop. We don't know. And the human society at this point somehow resembles people sitting in the train, fast track. We have so many duties to do. We have so many things to do in our career, in our family life. Raising the children, being successful in our career. Fast food training. Do we have time to sit down and reflect on what we are doing? If we are sitting in this kind of prayer, we should be definitely reflecting and thinking how to slow down this train, how to stop. There is also a movement there's mentioned in geographical books called city safe. That's a movement of cities that get together and they promote calm, peaceful life. And there's a foundation for it. The cities receive such funds. They can apply for funding and they can develop an environment that is more people work, people enjoy the nature, people enjoy the environment, and yet it's a slower pace, so people have enough time to relax and reflect. So there are different types of movements that already understand this. And I believe that the future generation needs to be raised. Is thinking about the profession more. How did I get into science, into geoscience? That's also a very interesting story. And it goes back again to Copernicus. I was in 4th grade. And I remember the day like it was yesterday. A teacher comes to the class and tells us, takes to understand that they all are descendants of apes. There's no God. There's no creation. Your parents are all wrong. They believe in religion, they believe in myth. Just forget it. Education is not proving, and science is proving that God doesn't exist and we evolved naturally. These actually remind me of my 4th grade. I don't look like 4th grade anymore, so it must have been a long time ago. But when I read the work of Dawkins, for example, I have the same, I see the same reason. So we were 10 years old, maybe, when it's supposed to be 10, I don't know this very moment. But little kids, they were arguing with the teacher. We call them comrades. I'm a teacher, right? Please listen to what I have to say. So we told them, what do you want to say? So we gave our arguments. If you are for monkeys, why do this? And if you are for monkeys, why don't we have a long tail like they do? And this kind of kids' questions giving our teacher, we just kept answering them and getting more frustrated because we were fighting for God and for religion. And there he was telling us what to believe. There was nothing in common because our teachers were also sinful parents. They were always personal parents to forget religion, to forget the church, and because the science was improving. So I had my own questions. And the just teacher was already at this time. I looked at me to the right. I was sitting in the first row. And he said, if you really want to know truth, study natural sciences. So I looked down, I sat down in my chair, and I was thinking, I can't ask my parents anymore. I cannot ask anybody else. I really have to do it if I want to know truth. This is the truth. And since that moment, I've been thinking about natural sciences. I don't know what I would do otherwise. This really had a big impact on my decision. And as I was thinking, first I was thinking about geology, then mathematics and geography, and then biology, because it's what we learned about evolution. Evolution was used as a big argument. That's how I became signed up myself for the Faculty of Natural Sciences in Copernicus University in Bratislava. That's how I got into science, and I stayed in that very field until now. Similar. And every time I do my research and reflect on the textbooks, I'm still thinking about the time when I was in my 4th grade, and making this decision. So many things, so many ways happening in our life. And I'm so thankful that you're willing to share these moments with me. Because I never had a chance actually to say in such a large scale and all together in a long amount of time. But this is not only a story about research, about science, but about the life of a human being that crosses so many boundaries. And one of the biggest boundaries that crossed in my life, physically, was the boundary of iron, carbon. New generations doesn't know much about it, doesn't care. But those of us who live behind iron curtain, separated by 3 sets of electric lines, looking at Austria, there was just a mile behind the fence, seeing people walking there in the fields, and us standing behind the fence and having no chance to cross the fence. It was very fascinating, very fascinating. One of the geography students one time, after taking trip, was sitting on the mountain, sitting with Timmy's car copying on that mountain, and was there close. I can't even recall the name of that. And they were pointing at the astronaut, with the finger, and they just kept pointing and laughing, and what young people do, they horse around taken to the station to investigate it, because just simply pointing the finger into the hospital. What was the meaning of pointing the finger at hand? What was the meaning of looking into the person behind the fence? And they have to explain themselves. They didn't mean any harm, they're just talking about something else. And that has nothing to do about planning to escape. So the lives can be so different. The regional identities can be so different. The stories and the geography of the places can be so different. It's just amazing that variety that we have to grasp, we have to put together, we have to find the best solution somehow for our lives and for the lives of the children and for the future generations. And I believe that's what we're trying to do also in our department. And I hope that during this lecture we have a sense about the importance of geography and environmental science department. We are a small group, but it's so important that we give this message to hope and to young people. The message of sustainable development, preservation of nature, living intimately within our planet in harmony, because that's our future, in good relationship, using the resources wisely. And that's what, and teaching, most of all. It's not only technology that we want to teach you, it's not knowledge, but also love this planet, love this place. Because once you understand that, you will be able to protect, you will be able to find solution for the future generation. I can't believe that our generation is going to leave this planet with these problems, leaving the problems of younger generations, the world about the unprotected environment, the destruction of the environment, about the pollution, atmosphere, water pollution, and etc. So, just to mention my colleagues, thank you for coming here. And we've been very hard to meet you this time of getting adapted to this environment. Or is somebody who used to do a great job in ecology, coastal ecology, sentinels, in coastal environment, and he's dedicated his life to it. So, and certainly his teaching, you can see it in his speech, you can sense it in his speech, love for his place, love for his time. And that will be carried on the future generation of students. Giant students, beautiful, secret, rebranding, environment, urban environment, cultural aspects, cultural geography, math, self-information. Also, all important knowledge is being passed on to our students in the future generation. And somebody who's physical sciences, very glacial knowledge. Today he was presenting the topic for Professor Chester for seasonal schools, problems, working classes. So, another important aspect, another important data for our students to learn in future generations to connect physical, geology, and environment that we live on. Victoria, tourism. We all want to travel, we want to experience places, but we also want to support sustainability. We also want to go to these places and not just cause some kind of economic impact, but also protect the environment for the future generations as well. One of the things that I sometimes don't understand is when I look at the outside of our campus, these times. While our Liverpool University looks like a nice, sustainable environment, as soon as we leave this place, we've already seen the paper bags, bottles,
thinking, look at people are taught these things. Different generations know about this. What's going on? How can you just be walking from bus station towards the high school, children are eating, as they call it, right on the side. In the United States, we put this up. Your mom hasn't working. But here, yes, people pick up the paper and do it. What are teachers doing is teaching this my generation. So our responsibility is certainly to going back to Copernicus, to sustain design the life of this planet, to clean up our heritage, to keep it well and well organized and clean. Because that's the basis of everything we do. We have to start somewhere before we clean pollution in the rivers, in the lakes, in the atmosphere. We have to start cleaning our us. We have to get energy of sustainable living. And this is what is the problem with heliocentric system. This is why I call my lecture paradox. Because I believe the church is fighting for geocentric view. Because the messages come from the Bible. It's about God focusing on individual. Scripture says, even hair on your head are counted. And no one bird falls down from the sky without God's rule. So you feel like God is focusing on human beings. So he's geocentric. But that doesn't mean it's geocentric. But certainly we get the impression that we are special. That human beings are special. But once the science for some reason is trying to tell us that we are not special, just animals who just evolved from the lowest evolution chain stages into the path. So I think that's something that is serious, has a serious need. And I can understand why the church was so reluctant to adopt this. On the other hand, we have to really be open for science, because science is what we did in Middle Ages. Thomas Simon, he was a philosopher and theologist. He wanted to dispute Copernicus and disapprove his theory and his model on the basis of philosophy. Can you do that? Not really, because he has evidence. And he builds mathematical model on the evidence, observation. There's not much we can find. It's a different thing. It's to look beyond what is beyond science. And what if that science is lifting up humanity or is putting down the humanity? You have to watch that. Because science has been missing so many times. And the progress we get into the discussion. We go backwards. In conclusion, I would like to mention my evidence, because that really reflects to a lot. Going from Copernicus to my city there, it's quite interesting journey, very interesting story. It's a really small community. I started with my father. During the World War II, the Nazi occupation, as a local government, he knew what was going on. Because when Nazi Germany was trying to do something, they went to the local government. So local government knew what was going on. So what he did, he hid the Jews. And, the penalty, if the Nazis would find out, the Gestapo was in the next village, and he survived. He also warned the people, and the Gestapo came, and began talking to Maggie, notarius, about a certain person. He knew this person was a child. It means only one thing. Gestapo is looking after you. So he sent a message to these people saying, run as fast as you can, because I'll be coming officially. And my dad was officially said, you have to go. Open the door, and so on. The government was asking me to come to the government. And the person was not there, he came back and told me the person is missing, he's not there. So he was sad. And it happened many times when I was growing up. The people stopped me and said, who are you? So well, I'm going to give us, well, which one? Well, I'm the poor guy. And they say, oh, that your father came over for me. Please greet your father for me. And I came home and said, wow, why this person was so happy about? Well, it was one of those who received a message from your father to run as fast as he could to save his life. He was a man of strong convictions. When the communist government took over, he refused to take crucifix down from the wall. Because the crucifix is of the previous period, and it was natural, normal. In Catholic country like Slovakia, you have crucifix hanging in the offices, especially in the government offices. Just like here, crucifix when you walk in his home. So, and he said, no, I'm not going to. I didn't put it there. I was going to take it down. 3 months of jail for public disturbance. This, he never talked about. Never talked about how it was in the jail. Never ever could get anything out of him. One day, 1 hour, I looked right in the jail. I just only assumed, I didn't think it. That was the toughest the communist was on the rise. My mother, because he lost a job, and she raised us on about $10 per month. She was running the family. That was really a perfect example of God organized sustainability. When we dropped the book, every time we got a slice of bread, we had to pass. Then we were allowed to come, and so forth. When the bread fell down on the ground, you were supposed to pick it up, kiss it, bless it, and then you throw it to the brothers. But this kind of basic fundamental education taught me really sustainability. What is sustainable all the time? Caring about this one, caring about this environment, preserve it for the future generation. And it's amazing how simple teachings can lead to so much good. She was truly the reflection of Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was another example of a great scientist and a religious person at the same time. When he was confronted by his colleagues, you know, you have a face like a peasant. He was not offended. He looked back and responded, like a peasant, man. I would like to have a face like a peasant woman. And most of the people who really don't understand what I'm talking about, but I grew up with my peasant woman, and my aunts and my environment. And I know what I'm talking about. His face was so strong. My mother's face was extremely strong in a terrible situation. And I thank God I could find out and see where it is. I lose face very often. Men is allowed to doubt. Men go to Bible in the village and they start doubting. But when they come home, we'll be hushed by the wives for speaking such as statements against resistance or doubt. So sometimes on the way to church on the Sunday, we stop for a drink and come back. Or on the way from church, we stop in the local pub and come back. So peasant man was allowed to have doubts and was not actually an example of the strongest faith. But the peasant woman was really the best example of the simple state of faith. And Louis Pasteur reflected that. So that was my background. I grew up in, and I'm not, I think that these simple people do a great job by passing these books on, and I hope I can pass it to generations. Because I enjoy the power of life. I often use it in my speeches, and I always find it very, very, very important. And that's quid agis, prudenter agis, and there are speeds at him. English speaking, Congress of 1,000. Third is very often pronounced as church, speech and feeling, which is more like Italian. So what does it mean? It means whatever you do well, and always work in the end of things. Goal, final purpose. So what is our final goal? What is our final purpose? My final goal this very moment was to make my inaugural lecture enjoyable, entertaining, educational, and bring the middle-aged talking speech into the audience. Because at that time there was no technology. There were no microphones, there were no screens. You had to speak to the audience, and you had to make people excited about what we're excited about speech about. So I hope to fulfill this goal. Try to do that. In our department, the same thing we want to take care of our students, be general. And all my colleagues are excellent teachers. There's no problem with teaching. I don't see them. And I hope that everybody else is trying to do the same thing. And we want to do well, and we want to build up this university and this environment the best we can, so the future generations will be happy with what we left them, and can thank us for us, for our lives, and for our contribution to this story. So thank you for your attention.
Respected Vice Chancellor, colleagues and guests, it is my pleasure as Dean of the Faculty of Science to respond to Professor Siska's inaugural lecture. Professor Siska's inaugural lecture on the geocentric cosmological paradox is a reflection on the revolutionary work of Nicholas Copernicus and his theory of heliocentric cosmology. Most people know Copernicus as the father of modern astronomy. He, of course, altered astronomy forever by declaring that the sun is at the center of the universe, not the earth. His heliocentric theory had great repercussions, and we saw in Professor Siska's lecture those repercussions not only in the world of science, but also with society in general. However, astronomy and cosmology was not Copernicus's only achievement. He also played a role as a physician. Actually, he was trained in medicine. He was a doctor, a medical doctor. He studied arts. He also studied canon law. In fact, he was a clergy, he was a canon in a church. He was a political leader. He was an economist, a map maker, and he was a political leader, also a calendar reformer. He, of course, spoke Polish. He was Polish by origin. He spoke German and Latin and understood Greek and Italian. So what we see here is a truly multidisciplinary scientist whose interdisciplinary work combining mathematics, particularly in mathematics, geometry, if we look at Copernicus's work, geometry, physics, and of course, philosophy. So combining those in interdisciplinary fashion, he inspired other astronomers such as Galileo and Kepler. In fact, Kepler's law of planetary motion and the concept of elliptic orbits is based on Copernicus's mathematical formulation and computations. So what we see here is that only excellent research can have such an impact similar to the Copernican revolution that we saw in the reflection of Professor Siska's lecture. Like in Copernicus's time, unlearning of old scientific attitudes and practices is always painful. On the other hand, adopting new and fresh approaches, including interdisciplinary work, also opens exciting perspectives of personal development and higher overall performance. Interdisciplinary, I mentioned, is increasingly recognized as important by the academics, by the governments, by the UK research councils, because the big challenges facing society will not be addressed or fixed by one academic discipline or, for that matter, one scientific method on its own. These are, as we know, big, complex questions such as living with environmental change, global uncertainties, security, lifelong health, and well-being. The digital economy and energy needs are all such examples of such complex problems. Those who choose to not follow deeper intellectual reasons for fostering collaborative research across disciplinary boundaries take the risk of not even understanding why their projects are failing. Mathematics and geography have walked hand in hand throughout the history since the rise of ancient civilizations. And I know that Professor Siska also incorporates mathematics into his own research and teaching. So he uses the quantitative methods such as geostatistics into geomorphology and ecosystem modeling. Professor Siska has shown in his lecture that there is the connection between physical sciences, philosophy, and theology. Professor Siska's lecture emphasizes that physical sciences, humanities, philosophy, and theology have all made valuable contributions to global truth. They work together on two common goals: the well-being of human society and the quality of life. This is portrayed in Professor Siska's lecture as he discusses sustainable development. We are all part of natural ecosystems on this planet, and this is our only home, and we should be careful how we manage our resources in preserving our environment and be aware of great challenges that we face today, especially issues such as global warming, air and water pollution, soil erosion, and deforestation. Professor Siska's vision is to prepare our students for these challenges. He has made a case for our joint effort to face these tasks and develop integrated educational programs that will raise future generation of environmentally conscious scientists who will lead society into more responsible management of resources. There is a lot to be done in this regard. We are still far from achieving sustainable development on this planet. I suppose the takeaway message from Professor Siska's inaugural lecture is that we come together as scholars, individuals, and educators united in our goal to pursue justice, truth, and beauty. As Professor Siska has outlined, the department needs to work in more interdisciplinary fashion for 4 reasons: to provide an attractive and value-adding curriculum for our undergraduates and postgraduates, as a response to external research calls and opportunities; thirdly, to increase research capacity and quality publications; and fourthly, to address increasingly complex society environment questions. Moving through and looking beyond the current RAF period as we enter into the next research excellence framework period, the department's strategy will be to strengthen this interdisciplinarity further, working within and beyond the department to address research questions of international significance, scale and uncertainty, and complexity, all of which requires transdisciplinary perspectives, while at the same time adding greater capacity in key subdisciplinary fields. Some examples of such a cutting edge of geography include geoinformatics, practical applications of GIS that Professor Siska mentioned in his talk, for example, applications in health domain, areas of geography such as climatology, geomorphology, glaciology or glacial microbiology, which is an emerging area, hydrology, soil science, biogeography, and eco-hydrology, to mention a few. The existing work, as Professor Siska mentioned in his talk, the work on sand dunes in the department has a great potential to be of internationally excellent and world-leading level. Colleagues, I'm sure that, like me, you look forward to the development of both the department and Professor Siska, and welcome our founding professor of geography and environmental science. Professor Siska, on behalf of us all, I thank you for your inaugural lecture, and we are now looking forward to your continued tenure to the chair, to the great benefit and advantage of our university, our students, and of all of our colleagues. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you, Professor Siska, again, for a stimulating discussion. One got a glimpse of a late medieval discourse in the style you presented your lecture, rather than a closely argued, read text, which was refreshing. And thank you, Dean, for that summary done in the typical mathematical style of your own discipline. And I should mention that this is the new Dean's very first response to a professor since his tenure, which is really literally a few months ago. So I'm delighted then to, on your behalf, congratulate Professor Siska. Professor Siska, would you come forward, please, and receive from us a little token to remember this evening, something that keeps the title of your lecture and also puts down the date. And hope this will be a very memorable evening. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, and good evening.